Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. Make sure you go check out all my books. Start with the best-selling Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and the 2 workbooks that are fillable that go right along with it, the Threat Assessment and Defense Assessment workbooks. Also, for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Now, that's a book of pictures you give to your children, and you let them go through it, and in the pictures are lessons about security and awareness, and you, the parent, go over to teamlittlebigs.com and download the free lesson plans that go with each picture. All of this is a package that makes your life, your family more aware, safer, and able to look at yourself from the attacker's point of view. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 accompanying workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children, and the lesson plans that exist on teamlittlebigs.com. And now, let's start the show.
The first African Americans into the English colonies came to Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619. They were slaves. They'd been captured against their will, but they landed in colonies that didn't have slavery. There were no laws about slavery in the colonies at that time. The United States didn't inherit slavery from anybody. We created it.
Jonathan Gilliam back in on the Experts Podcast. The truth has arrived. And that marvelous soundbite was courtesy of Crazy Tim Kaine, the guy that looks like he would drive an evil ice cream truck. Guy's absolutely weird. And I don't know if you paid close attention to that soundbite. I'm going to play it again, where he says that I'm just going to play it again so you can hear. The slaves that came over in the 1600s were already slaves, but America created slavery, is what he was saying. Not my words, those are his words. So we will, I'm going to turn that back on so you can hear this and we can break it down, because this is only the start of the nonsense that I really think is a good example of where we have completely gone to just in a short 2-month period, 3 months if you want to count March. Let me back this up a little bit. So here's the soundbite again from Tim Kaine.
First African Americans into the English colonies came to Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619. They were slaves. They'd been captured against their will.
They were slaves. They had been captured against their will. That's what he's saying. Okay, that part is absolutely true. They were already slaves sent to the United States by slave traders. Slavery was, and always has been in the world, up until the United States changed that. And the Constitution changed that, because the way it was written, it had to be changed. It took some time. Great men and women suffered as slaves, but their suffrage was not in vain. They are the legacy of the people that were in this country, that the Constitution had to get to a point where it recognized these people, where it recognized everyone as being created equal. Without the Constitution, they would not have ever gotten there. There's a very good chance, if the Founding Fathers hadn't have written the Constitution the way that they did, that slavery would not just be prevalent in the United States, it would be prevalent around the world. And to be honest with you, it's the flavor of the decade, or of the time period. All races and genders have been, and religious entities have been slaves at some point or another. There are still slaves in the world. but not in the modernized world. And even in the modernized world, the reality is they're still slaves. They're like sex slaves and people that are traded. It still happens. But in this case, what he just explained is that these slaves were brought here by slave traders. Now listen what he says now.
But they landed in colonies that didn't have slavery. There were no laws about slavery in the colonies at that time.
Now, there were no laws concerning slavery at that time, because up until that point in history, there really had been no laws on slavery. It was something that was a part of life. And if you owed somebody something, it didn't really, I mean, in that period in time, those that were brought over from Africa and those that were in the United States had dark skin. There's no denying that. But you can see throughout history, if you were poor, you could be enslaved. If you owed somebody something, you could be enslaved. It's just the way it was, as horrible as that is. Again, if it hadn't been for the Constitution, we wouldn't have ever gotten past that. You're never going to hear this type of truth coming from Tim Kaine or anybody that runs in his crew. Listen what he says now.
The United States didn't inherit slavery from anybody. We created it. It got created by the Virginia General Assembly and the legislatures of other states. It got created by the court systems in colonial America and since that enforced fugitive slave laws. We created it.
Now, that is absolutely not true. I would think if you looked at the laws, they put into place the same laws that were in existence around the world about slave trading, or about, and when the Constitution was written, about the percentages of what makes up a man. Terrible. Absolutely horrific. But that's the way it was throughout history. We have only became that modern in recent times, since the 1800s, really. And even then, I mean, when slavery disappeared, there was still forms of slavery in this country and around the world. But for Tim Kaine to say that we created it is one of the most idiotic, divisive lies. It's not a statement. It wasn't an incompetent statement. That is a crafted lie. It's one of the worst lies I've ever heard in my life. This guy was going to try to be vice president with Hillary Clinton. I don't know if you remember that. And he reflects perfectly. I mean, this guy isn't just somebody on the fringe elements of the Democrat Party. This guy is in the mix with the Democrat Party. And what he speaks and the lies that he spews will always fall to the divisive left side that tries, and I hope people realize this, the divisive left side that has maintained a hold on the black community, on the gay community, on females, as though they fight the good fight. And they do not fight the good fight. They continue to cause division. They don't heal any wounds. There is no Democrat that has healed a wound. That's not what they do. And many on the Republican side, they don't heal them either. This soundbite is so egregious to what we are as a country that it just shows you exactly how they feel. They hate America. They hate America. They either believe it's bad, many of the people believe that it's bad, they look at the founding fathers. This is a typical leftist, Democrat, liberal type of narrative. that the founding fathers were racist and that they were slave owners and so on and so forth. And they're now trying, even people talking about taking down the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. They tagged and spray painted the Lincoln Memorial when they were rioting. These narratives of these people make it seem, and exactly what Tim Kaine is saying here, they make it sound like America was born out of evil, not fleeing from tyranny. They didn't come here and bring slavery. There were slave owners everywhere in the world. The people that came here, the original slaves that came here, were slaves traded by slave owners. I'm sure many of them did not know where they were going. Most of them probably had no idea. But the way Tim Kaine makes it sound is as if these people that were put on a boat coming over here as though they were going on a cruise and they just showed up in America, and all of a sudden the evil Americans in Virginia just took them and made them into slaves and then passed laws, and the judges and the generals and everybody were involved with it because they were evil. That's the way he makes it sound, as if nowhere else in the world did this exist. And that's absolutely not true. It's not true. We are at a critical point. You know, I don't know if you've noticed this. Maybe you have, those of you that listen to the show often. But my speech pattern has completely changed in the way that I speak during these podcasts. And even when I give interviews on television and the radio, it's changed because I have to critically think my way through these comments. You say something, you say the wrong phrase, they're going to come after you. You say something without backing it up with full explanation, they're going to come after you. And you know what? They may come after you anyway. One thing that I see for Tucker Carlson, for instance, who I'm no fan of Tucker, but I think his narrative has actually been pretty good over the past couple of weeks, although he'll turn right around and go left. He's just not as far left as these other people. But listen, I'm going to make no bones about it. I liked Tucker Carlson. I've done a show on this before. I liked him, met him, was a nice guy, very nervous guy. But when he started criticizing Trump as though about the bombing of the Iranian general, as though he had the experience to criticize, he has no military experience. He knew nothing about what he was saying. And why on earth would he criticize that? I don't know, except for the fact that many of the people that Tucker Carlson runs with from the Daily Caller are very young and very anti-Semitic. And they believe that Israel is responsible for nearly everything that happens to this country. Now, he may not report that on his show, but all the people that came to his defense, that's the way they feel. When I criticized him about criticizing the president when he has no experience. That's the problem. These people could cover this properly, but they live in a bubble. And most of them don't have any experience. So when we look at Tim Kaine and we look at these lies that are happening, people like Tucker Carlson, he goes on and he's saying the right things. But what he never talks about, and what even Sean Hannity missed the day before yesterday, talking about how law enforcement can be reformed. What they're missing, the whole point that they're missing, is that they are going to get burned in this day and age. And they're going to dig themselves a hole if they are not smart enough to carefully choose their words. Especially them, because they're on TV shows. Now, I don't think Sean's going to have any problem with that, because Sean doesn't go down that rabbit hole too far. And he's been doing this for 30 years, and so he thinks his way through that stuff. But this is something that people are going to have to start being very careful with. And it's why I pause and carefully think my way through what I'm saying. You will hear long pauses now in this show when I'm talking about any type of racial issue, because they are killing careers right now. And as stupid as it sounds, you can't have your own opinion. The Oklahoma State football coach, Mike Gundy, I believe is his name, wore a shirt, a One American News shirt, which I love that network. They're a great network. They're very middle of the road, very they put on good news, and they have opinion shows like everyone else. But this guy, in a private setting, going fishing with his son and someone else, has a One American News shirt on. And because he did wear that shirt, one of the Oklahoma State football players, the star running back, Chuba Hubbard, said, quote, he will not do anything with Oklahoma State until things change. Until things change. This coach was wearing a shirt from a news network that is not censored by the FCC. The government has not said that they are racist government. There's been no movement to get rid of them. There's been no civil lawsuits or criminal lawsuits saying that they've done anything illegal. There's been nobody calling for slavery on One American News or for anything like that. And his response, this Chuba Hubbard, his response was, he will not be doing anything with Oklahoma State until things change. Again, this is a shirt that the coach Gundy was wearing on his own, away from the school, fishing with his family. And it was on social media. And because of that, this coach doesn't apologize once. He does a minimum of two, maybe more. I've seen two different apologies, one with the running back. And I want you to hear what he says. Remember, we're not talking about the coach, Mike Gundy from Oklahoma State. We're not talking about him going out and calling somebody the N-word or saying that he thinks slavery should be legal in the country. He didn't wear a shirt that says, down with black people or anything like that. Okay. He wore a shirt that has OAN News Network on the shirt. And this was his apology.
I had a great meeting with our team today. Our players expressed their feelings as individuals and as team members
about a shirt that he was wearing on a fishing trip nowhere near school with no racial overtones on it whatsoever.
They helped me see through their eyes how the T-shirt affected their hearts. Once I learned how that
affected their hearts. So now you can't wear, you can't wear a news network shirt that says nothing. What happens if you wear, I don't know, a brand that they don't like? And it's just a brand. What happens if you have something on there that says, life is great, you should love everyone? Does that mean that you have to go on an apology tour because you love everyone? That's just the craziest thing I've ever heard. All right, let's go back to it.
How that network felt about Black Lives Matter. I learned how that network felt about Black Lives Matter. I was disgusted and knew it was completely unacceptable to me.
Now, Black Lives Matter, as I've stated over and over and over again, has virtually nothing to do. Now I'm talking about I'm sure there's people that march with Black Lives Matter and people that are a part and go out there for the right reasons because they want to do, they have in their heart, they want change. Okay. First of all, marching in the city center is not going to change anything. And marching in general and leaving up to politicians is not going to change anything. People need to get off their rear ends and go and change the inner city, change the culture of, fatherless homes, boys being raised without their fathers, girls being raised without their fathers, help get rid of the drugs from the inner city, build a relationship between law enforcement and the people that live there. Stop getting rid of laws that help out like stop and frisk. Okay, maybe you didn't agree with stop and frisk, but when you got rid of it and you didn't have anything else, you give an open light, green light to all the criminals to carry whatever they want. See, nobody thinks their way through these things. And this guy is going to go on an apology tour to a group, Black Lives Matter, or for Black Lives Matter because of OAN. And he probably doesn't even know that the people that started Black Lives Matter are communists, admitted communists. And if you follow the money trail of Black Lives Matter, it goes straight into the Democrat Party. The money goes to the Democrat Party. Now, if you think for a second that the Democrat Party is concerned about anybody, whether it be black people, women, gays, transgender, or anybody else for that matter, they don't care about poor people. They never talk about poor people. And poverty knows no color, folks. They're not going to save anybody. That's not their goal. Their goal is to divide. Because ultimately they believe the most dedicated communist mindset is that there will be a utopia with no government. And the people will just be in utopia. It's crap, right? So knowing that, which this coach may or may not know, that probably doesn't. Many or most of the black players probably don't know that either. And the white players who support them, they don't know this. They don't see this. They think it is a movement to change the rift between law enforcement and, well, that's what they've said at first, law enforcement and the killings of unarmed black men, 9 last year, more whites than blacks killed unarmed, more whites than blacks killed by law enforcement, armed every year. By far more people killed black on black crime in the inner city. When Black Lives Matter steps up and takes over, it becomes a political pack for the Democrat Party. The money that flows in there flows to the Democrat Party. And nothing gets changed. All these things that everybody's doing because they think it signifies change, like this right here, telling a coach that and complaining and saying, I'm not going to do anything else, and pressuring him to come out and apologize, has no idea about the reality of what One American News or anybody else said or says about Black Lives Matter. Now, I haven't heard what they said, but I know that One American News is not a racist network. And if they did any stories at all on Black Lives Matter that they are a corrupt organization, they were correct. But facts don't matter anymore. Truth doesn't matter anymore. Because when you put this type of an organization in charge that has this many people snowed, you got problems. And truth is not going to have any type of a stage in that environment. We'll go on with his apology.
And knew it was completely unacceptable to me. I want to apologize to all members of our team, former players, and their families for the pain and discomfort that has been caused over the last 2 days. Black lives matter to me. Our players matter to me. These meetings with our team have been eye-opening and will result in positive changes for Oklahoma State football.
Not really. Not really. There's the positive changes that are going to come out of this is that people are going to bitch and complain about every single thing. Coach, I don't like the cleats color. Coach, I'm offended because you said a prayer before we went out on the field. Coach, I'm offended by the flag and the national anthem. You see, it doesn't stop with One America shirt. It doesn't stop with that. Remember, the coach did nothing wrong. The coach did nothing wrong at all, and he's apologizing. So now, the way it is in this country right now is that you can be completely innocent, but if somebody doesn't like what you're wearing, you are now guilty and could lose your job and should be fired. Yet at the same time, Supreme Court now says that you can't fire gays or transgender because you don't want them in, you don't want a guy dressed as a woman in your business. You can't fire them now. So they're protected, but the rest of the country, black or white or Asian or whatever, you're not protected from losing your job if you do something that some group thinks is racist or wrong, or maybe they just don't like you. This is how bad it has gotten in this country, folks. It's horrific. Now let's finish this soundbite up. The whole thing is just a joke.
Changes for Oklahoma State football. I sincerely hope the Oklahoma State family, near and far, will accept my humble apology as we move forward.
What? That is embarrassing. I mean, literally, that is embarrassing. Not just for the country, but for him and for that school and for the guy that complained. Chubba Wubba or whatever his name is. That is embarrassing. That you are going to now create an environment. People have to go back there every day. And they're going to, football and playing football is a team sport. And it's best if you get along with the people that you're there with. Now, because of something that had nothing to do with racism, people are going to be walking on eggshells. And not just that, it's just stupid. This football player who has proven, he's proven by being there because he's black, he's proven that if you keep trying, whether you have natural talent or not, you keep trying, working out, doing what you have to do to become a better football player, you can be there, regardless of color. And he's there. And now a news network T-shirt offended him so bad that he had to make a public statement about it and blow it up. It's just gone crazy. The whole country has gone crazy. You know you've gone crazy when the French president, who is far left, is saying that their country will not take down statues and rewrite history. That's what he's saying. And he's also saying they outlawed chokeholds and then they reversed it because they listened to their police. That's France, ladies and gentlemen. France, a place where they're as far left as you can go without being full-blown communist. A place where they just live life like, c'est la vie, such is life. And the great America has been bested by France. Insanity. That is remarkably crazy. Now, another example of this ridiculousness of what's going on and a good lesson for patriots out there. And I did do it. I said a tweet today. We'll see if I get blowback from it. Again, doesn't matter what your opinion is or if it's right. Now, if you offend somebody, you can lose your job. Luckily, I'm self-employed at this point. So I said it's time for patriots to take control. If you're a police officer, you should realize that politicians have stopped backing your authority and you should get out of the way. And I honestly mean that, folks. I honestly mean that. If you're in law enforcement, you need to be making a decision right now. I'm not going to tell you your job. And I know it'd be difficult for one cop to do this and not all of the cops. But if it comes to a point where things boil over, and you go out there and you stop the patriots from doing what they need to do, you are responsible for the downfall of that area. Because you're not doing it. NYPD has a force of 38,000 police officers, and they were not able to stop the riots. Now, you could take 10,000, you could take 5,000, and you could have stopped everything. But they're hamstrung by the politics and by their really useless leftist criminal leader, Commissioner Shea, who is literally, he's the stool boy for de Blasio. I would not doubt if de Blasio takes a crap in a bucket every day just so that Commissioner Shea can pick it up and carry it and go dump it out, clean it, and bring it back to him. Speaking of de Blasio, this is how ridiculous it is. And let me finish that tweet real quick, because what I end the tweet with is not only that law enforcement should get out of the way and that they don't have authority anymore, unless they're going to do their job. Unless you're going to do your job. And in that case, if you do your job, all of the department have to stand together. One person has a good shoot and they try to come down on you, the whole department needs to quit. Walk off the job. Because you know what the chances are? If you do your job anyway, you're going to lose it. But the end of the tweet says, we the people still have our authority. We still have it right now. Whether or not we'll ever learn to use it, I don't know. But we still have our authority to battle socialism/communism takeover. And people need to realize that. I don't know if they will, but they need to realize it. Now, listen to this soundbite with de Blasio. I got to pause it.
Streets of New York.
Okay, so listen to this.
Was it a mistake to allow those tens of thousands of people to be marching in close distance along the streets of New York City?
No, Wolf, look, there are moments in history you got to see what's...
So, no. This is the same network, and they don't push him on this. This is the same network that right after this did a story on how dangerous it is for President Trump to have his rally in Oklahoma. Listen to de Blasio's excuse of why it wasn't bad for them to have thousands of people for the rally, or for the protests, which were really riots. Listen.
Of New York City?
No, Wolf, look, there are moments in history you got to see what's really going on. There has been an outpouring of frustration, of pain, of anger, demanding change. And this is, a lot of these changes have been needed for decades and generations. So no, that kind of just grassroots outpouring, spontaneous outpouring, you can't just ignore it. We tried to obviously keep reminding people to distance and wear masks, but the most important thing here is it was outdoor demonstrations. It was people authentically talking about the changes we need. We'll know in the next few days if we see any lasting impact. So far, we have not, thank God.
There are so many things wrong in that statement. He is saying that depending on the reason for the mass group out there, that it doesn't really matter about safety. So if he's saying that, he's either lying about the reality of the virus in New York City, and he's using it for control, or there is nothing to this virus anymore. I had the virus. I know that it is something, and I have people close to me that died from it. I was there, but he's lying about something, or he's just a completely worthless piece of crap, which that's probably part of the case. Now, he goes on to say, towards the end of it, that, and let me replay this part here.
I had to obviously keep reminding people to distance and wear masks, but the most important thing here is it was outdoor demonstrations. It was people authentically talking about the changes we need. We'll know.
People authentically talking about the changes that we need. Okay. Isn't that the job of governments? To figure out what changes, if any, need to happen, and then make those changes. And if there is no need for them, not make changes. See, that's where the Democrats and the far left leaning morons that follow them in this world always believe that there needs to be change. Everything always needs to change. Change it. Needs to be changed. This isn't good enough. We need to progress. Change it, change. I mean, I lived in New York for 15 years. I lived in Manhattan, the same apartment. I hardly changed anything. And my life was great. It was expensive. It was like living in college, but I had a great time. It was a nice place to be, safe place to be, enjoyed raising my dogs there and watching them grow old. And believe it or not, I had friends there. It was terrible, nasty liberals that lived there as well. And the leadership there is horrible. But it was nice to live there and experience it for a period of time in my life. I just left because that's all it was coming. But de Blasio is complete, and all these leftists forget, and now even those on the right, Lindsey Graham. This is no surprise to us. Lindsey Graham is a moron. He comes off and he said every once in a while, when up until John McCain died, he was John McCain's also his crapper boy, his bucket boy. When he died, he, all of a sudden he got some testicles about him, and he would say certain things that people would say, hey, Lindsey Graham's coming around. Trust me, he isn't coming around. He's a liar. He's a snake. He is somebody that is not worthy to have ever worn the uniform. I don't even know the reality of what he ever did in the military. I think he's a JAG in the military, but I don't even know. Worthless regardless. And as a senator, absolutely worthless in his entire career. Now, I'm not saying that every senator and congressman should be out there making these huge, drastic changes with these gigantic bills all the time. But he is not a leader, and he's somebody who just works off of sound bites and convincing people to rehire him. He's a moron. And the stuff that he was saying yesterday absolutely goes right along with de Blasio on the stupidity level. Now let's pull his soundbite up right here. It's absolutely ridiculous.
So what brings us here?
Yeah. Obviously not hard work, Lindsey Graham.
I've learned over the years, but particularly recently, that every black man in America apparently feels threatened when they're stopped by the cops.
I don't know. This is just utter stupidity that we're hearing right here. This is grandstanding, apologizing for nothing, and virtue signaling. I actually didn't even know what virtue signaling was up until recently. And now it's blatant what it is. Blatant. Lindsey Graham is on a virtue signaling bandwagon so that he can ensure that he continues to get elected. That's what that is. I know plenty of black men who do not get scared when they get pulled over. You know why? Mostly because they don't get pulled over, because they're good guys. And if they have, and I know many of them that have gotten pulled over, most of the guys that I know would either sit there with their hands on the steering wheel, or would roll the window down and put their hands out and say, as the law enforcement officer approaches, "Sir, I am not armed. I just want to let you know that for your safety." That's what they do. They say that. They just put their hands out and say, "I am not armed. I want to let you know that for your safety." Instantly putting the officer at a little bit more ease. You can even, before they come up there, have your license out in your hand, put your hands out the window and say, "Officer, I am not armed. I just want to let you know that for your safety. Here's my license." Instead of getting in an argument with them. If you have a chip on your shoulder, somebody eventually will come along and bump you and knock that off. And especially if you go around waving it, you are going to cause a problem. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't cases where men got pulled over that had dark skin and got harassed by a cop. It's happened. Same thing with Latinos. I've heard a story once about I think it was either Border Patrol or sheriff. And we learned this in the FBI Academy, so it's a long time ago. I don't remember this story exactly, but I think there was a Supreme Court case where the officer had pulled this guy over 100 times. He knew who he was. He just kept pulling him over to harass him. You know, that's illegal. And any cop that comes up to a car with a chip on their shoulder, and the guy in the car has a chip on their shoulder, guess what? They're very well, if one of them is not the diffuser, something could happen. And that's a sad state of affairs. But you know what else? If a guy goes to a bar with a chip on his shoulder and another guy goes to the bar with a chip on his shoulder and they're both drinking, it could be bad. You could be walking down the sidewalk. You know, I was walking the other day, and I've started walking a lot more than jogging even. So we're walking, and a vehicle comes towards me and doesn't move over, and was probably 2 feet from me when it went by. And had I had a chip on my shoulder and that person had a chip on their shoulder, there probably would have been a fight. But luckily I'm a cool dog, so nothing happened. But the point of this is, if every cop that approached a car with a black guy in it was going to harass them and did harass them, you would be talking about millions of cases of harassment a day. A day. There are millions of interactions with cops daily around the United States. That is not an over-exaggeration. So for Lindsey Graham to come out there and say that, he's as useless can be. And I wish he would just retire and go away. He annoys me so much. It's a seat that somebody with real ideas and real posturing to stand for what's right. We need people in the Senate and in Congress and in local governments. We need people that will stand for the Constitution and not apologize for no reason. That is a fake fact. That is a lie that Lindsey Graham said. Not every black man. First of all, Lindsey Graham doesn't know every black man, and anybody that said and told him that every black man feels that way is a liar as well. I don't care if they have light skin or dark skin. They're a liar. They don't know what every man feels. Maybe everybody that they know feels that way because they all have chips on their shoulder. Or maybe they live in an area where it's a high crime rate, which very well could be if they live in the inner city. I'm not saying these things don't happen, but I do know that they don't happen to everybody. And for somebody to make a statement like that is a lie. Lindsey Graham is a liar. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here. Now, I talked yesterday a little bit about this shooting that occurred in New Mexico, where rioters were trying to tear down a statue of an individual that they don't like. I mean, it has to do something with it was one of the people that massacred a tribe, an Indian tribe. I don't know when, but really the background of the story of the statue is actually less important than, and although they would say, no, it's more important because these people were massacred and somebody erected a statue. Okay. I'm not saying that's not important. And I'm not saying that if they wanted to tear down, they should, I don't believe anybody should be tearing anything down, but if they want it down, they should go to court for it. But that's not the way it works anymore, right? If you have enough people and it has to do with something that is a social thing that you don't like and you're a minority, well, you could just go around tearing anything down that you want now. You know, just like the T-shirt. It doesn't matter if there's if somebody's, just throws a shirt on and is going fishing, they're going to come after you and try to ruin your career. Which, by the way, something I didn't mention a minute ago, the guy that actually complained about it, the star running back, he also came out and apologized after the coach apologized. And he said, maybe I went about it the wrong way. Well, he went about it the same way that all the young people now do. And all the people in general that are on the left, they will go and try to ruin a person. They will just try to ruin them instead of ever talk to him, sitting down and saying, this is why we feel this way. Why do you feel the way you do? The coach may not have had a feeling one way or the other. The people at One American News may not have a feeling one way or the other. But they don't do that. They just get it in their heart that they need to be destroyed. And they can get away with it. And the same thing with the statue. If it offends them, they just get a bunch of people together, scream minority, and tear the statue down. And that seems to be happening more and more. Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out about this. I want to stay as neutral as possible. I did watch the video, and it's interesting. Brian from Talking Guns that I've had on this show before put the video up and on Facebook and Instagram. And the video he put up actually is cell phone footage of the guy getting beat up by 3 people, a girl and 2 guys, and he'd been hit multiple times with a skateboard. Now, it's just a skateboard. You can kill somebody with a skateboard, and they are going straight for his head. And the guy has something in his hand. I can't tell if it was a knife. I know he had glasses in one hand. It looked like he had something else in his other hand, the guy with the skateboard. He picks up he runs down the street. First, it's 2 people. Well, it was a whole mob of people chasing this guy out. 2 people in particular were all over him, hitting him. He had his gun out already because he'd been chased down the street. This guy comes running through the crowd, grabs a skateboard, and starts cracking him right across the head with it. And as he starts to fall back, he pulls his gun, or he already has his gun up, but he pulls his gun up after he gets cracked in the head. And and they scream out in the video, "We're going to effing kill you." That's what they say. And he shoots the guy that had the skateboard and hits him again, very similar to the case in Atlanta. He hits him as the guy turns to run away, and all this took place within a fraction of a second, and he shoots him in the back. I think he may have shot him in the neck as well. He cracked off 4 rounds and hit the guy, and the guy falls down and instantly. Now, before I even go to that point, should they have been there armed? Well, I don't know. I can't say no that this other group should have been there armed trying to protect the statue, right? I can't say no, they shouldn't have been there because they have every right to be there as much as the people that are rioting. They're not protesters. Listen, let's make the distinction, okay? Protesters show up and voice their opinion. They don't show up and tear things down. But see, you wouldn't know that if you listen to the media. For instance, listen to what KOAT Action News 7 in Albuquerque. Listen to what Brittany Hope has to say and the way she describes this.
Hi, Doug. So we just got out of a press conference here at Civic Plaza, and we learned a lot more about exactly what unfolded last night. The mayor did say APD in the city are now working with the FBI on this, saying it could be related to domestic terrorism.
Okay, first of all, she's an idiot. Secondly, domestic terrorism is the use of force, intimidation, violence for a political aim. This guy was shooting in self-defense. It's clearly evident. Anybody who looks at the video, and trust me, and listen, folks, if anything besides self-defense comes out of this, sometimes you'll see in cases where in self-defense cases, they say that you antagonize or whatever, and you get manslaughter. But if a domestic terrorism charge happens, or if first or second degree murder happens in this case, I mean, I don't think any of it should. I think the guy should be, I honestly believe after watching the video that the guy should be set free. He didn't show up there and pull his gun out and shoot somebody. He went there, stood his ground with rioters, Now, I'm not saying I don't know anything about these people, and I'm not defending their actions. I'm saying what I saw in the video, that they were defending the statue while other people were trying to tear the statue down. Ultimately, nobody should have been allowed to be there if the tensions were that high. And if the protesters can't do it civilly, then they shouldn't be allowed to be there either. It's not protesting in the First Amendment in the Constitution and all the other amendments. None of them give you the right to go in and burn a city down. So were the guys right to be there protecting the statue? I think they have just as much right as the people trying to tear it down. But ultimately, none of them should have been there. And if law enforcement in the city had been doing their job and allowed to do their job, and the protesters had been peaceful, then we wouldn't have the shooting. But when I watched the shooting, and I watched how he got chased off by a mob who were beating him. And one guy comes up and grabs listen, a skateboard is a deadly weapon if you're using it the same way as you'd use a baseball bat to hit somebody in the head. And he's overwhelmed, pulls his gun out, already has it out as he's getting hit. And as the skateboard strikes him in the head, he pulls the gun up. And at the same time he shoots, the guy drops the skateboard and he shoots 3 more times, hitting the guy. The guy's in critical condition. From what I saw, there was nothing related to terrorism. I don't care if it was a Muslim that did the shooting. If people were chasing them out of there and the guy was Muslim and he pulled his gun out while he's getting hit in the head by 3 different people and beat with a blunt object, and he shoots them, it's self-defense. This report is absolutely stupid. Now listen to what she says about the protesters.
We also learned that New Mexico State Police is now working with the district attorney, and they're the ones taking care of this investigation. But before we went to that press conference, we did talk to a man who was there at the protest when those shots rang out, and he caught it all on his cell phone. We want to show you that video right now.
Now, she's gonna describe some stuff, but I want you to hear how she describes the protesters.
Protesters taking matters into their own hands.
Bingo, right there. Protesters taking matters into their own hands. That's the way they're reporting this. Not rioters, not individuals showing up to destroy public property, whether they like it or not, folks. It's public property. These things were erected. They've been there for a long, long time. Love them or hate them, there's a legal way to go about getting them taken down. But they didn't do that. They didn't do that. They just showed up, and as she said, protesters taking matters in they're rioters. Okay, there's no doubt about it. And it absolutely sums up everything I'm talking about here. I can't hear her say this enough, the way she describes it.
Protesters taking matters into their own hands.
Now, here's the thing, what I was going to say about the shooting. The shooting occurs, and everybody starts screaming, call 911, call 911. Now, I give the cops a lot of grief on here because I was one. All right, I was in law enforcement for many, many years. Camp Robinson police officer, federal air marshal, FBI special agent. All right, I know what it's like. And in New York City, where I was an FBI agent and an air marshal, and in the FBI I had detectives as my partner the entire time. They taught me how to be a cop, a true cop in a city. They always used to comment when I was listening to him, when I talked to him, and this is the way you feel after you've been a cop for a while, is that the same people that hate you are going to be the first people to call you when they're in distress. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were screaming bloody murder as soon as the shots rang out, call 911, call 911. Other individuals were there, jump down, I'm sure they have their medics there when they come there and protest, because these are organized protests. Remember, they aren't just going around the country and springing up protests where they want to tear down these statues. These are organized leftists that organize these protests. And then you have the other people who feel strongly about it. They come there, they get involved, and as she said, they take matters in their own hands, and they riot. And they destroy public property. And they do it an illegal way. So they're doing this, they tear it down, or they're trying to tear it down. The shooting occurs. They start screaming for 911, and it just started reflecting in my ears. What they always used to say is that the same people that will shoot you or don't want you or want the police departments disbanded are the first people that are going to call when they need help, and they're the first ones to complain when you don't show up there fast enough. So I'm listening to this. The shooting occurs. Everybody starts screaming, call 911. They start patching. The people that were there start patching and holding the guy's wounds and talking to him. Law enforcement shows up, and instantly, like a bunch of gnats, if you've ever been in the South or anywhere where it's humid and the gnats get on you and you wave your hand and they fly away and they instantly fly right back. The protesters just all wearing, the common Antifa type black hoodies and covered faces, and all these people instantly start showing right back up, just like a bunch of gnats. And then they all have their hands up, screaming, I can't breathe, don't shoot. The guy's still laying on the ground, shot, bleeding, dying. And the cops surround the other guys, and cuff the other guys. And eventually, these people start yelling at the cops, saying, F you, F the police, with their hands up, intimidating the cops, won't move back, screaming at the cops while the guy is laying 5 feet from them, dying. They didn't care at all about that guy. And eventually, after they get the guy in the ambulance, which it was another ball of crap when it looked like the ambulance couldn't get their own stretcher out of the ambulance. I mean, what is going? And the stretcher that the SWAT team was using was, a field stretcher, which is like a piece of canvas that they throw somebody on top of. I mean, it was horrendous watching this, because when you know the way somebody should be handled, first of all, a truck pulled up, some civilian, they should have thrown the guy in the back of the truck and driven him immediately to a level 1 trauma unit, because that's the way you save somebody who's been shot. That's the way you save their life. But anyway, they finally get him in the ambulance, and the cops end up having to throw tear gas and flashbangs to get the crowd back. That's how crazy this whole thing is. But according to this knucklehead reporter, they were just people.
Protesters taking matters into their own hands.
Shut up, you idiot. They're just Brittany Hope. They don't have much hope in that location when it comes to journalism, that's for sure. And if the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism, they have reached an all-time low. You can, just exactly like in Wendy's parking lot in Atlanta, you can watch that, and if you've been in or you are in law enforcement, and you're investigating that, and you don't realize instantly that was a good shoot, you should just leave the job, or just openly admit that you're a leftist and you're going to convict anybody that does anything, legally or not, to somebody who they consider a minority. Absolutely ridiculous. Speaking of the DOJ and the FBI, Trump and his team are going full force after the lawsuit over John Bolton's book, who I think is a dirtbag. All these people are dirtbags, are all connected. And a top DOJ official resigned immediately after appearing in the lawsuit over this. So it just goes to show you, folks, of the pressure and the leftists and how it is expanding faster. I don't think people realize how fast they are maneuvering to flex their muscles now. It is happening very rapidly. So anyway, when it comes to this, the DOJ and the FBI and this guy, it's just a reflection on all the other madness that's going on, and how John Bolton, is going to just go out there and put out classified secrets. The president can't even have a conversation in his office with his national security advisor without fear now that they're going to go and write a book and express all the private conversations that they had, and they're classified or not. Now, there's two other things I want to mention real quick before we go, and these are things that you definitely want to hear. One, why, and I'm just going to ask this question, I'm going to leave it there. Why is Dr. Fauci coming out now and saying that they told the public, he's admitting that they told the public in the beginning that masks weren't necessary because they didn't have enough masks for the first responders. So they just lied to the people. They didn't think to say that we don't have enough masks for the first responders, so we're going to have to make sure that they get them first. We want you to wear a scarf around your face. Make sure that it's, the right type of material. They didn't even say that. They just said, we don't think you need to have your mouth covered. And he's admitting that they said that and it wasn't true. What? Is that not, how many people do you think caught it because they weren't wearing a mask at the time? So now it seems like you don't really need one now, it seems like. The last thing I want to tell you, and this is the same thing. In Atlanta, like I said, take the color out of the incident that happened there. If you could take the color out of all those people, make a computer generated model where they were just figures, it would be a good shoot. You would see that it's a good shoot. If you took the motion, took the color out of it, you'd see it's a good shoot. And then they burnt the Wendy's down. And this is the response from the CEO of Wendy's, right? Who had to come out and make it as though it's just another virtue signaling apology to her. Quote, "The tragic death of Rashard Brooks and the pain that this has caused saddens us all." Okay. A guy got shot in your parking lot. He was passed out drunk. The cops showed up, were very polite with him. He blew on the breathalyzer and was wasted. Then he fights the cops, grabs a taser. He gets tased, grabs the other cop's taser, takes off running with them in pursuit, yelling at him. He turns to shoot the cop with the taser and he gets shot. Why is Wendy's apologizing for that? Wendy's, he says, Wendy's is also let me back up here. He says, the tragic death of Rashard Brooks. Was it tragic? It's always tragic when these things occur. To an extent. Look, I'm a realist, okay? I take responsibility for my actions. If I do something wrong and I get in trouble, I take responsibility for it. But that's why I don't do things wrong. That's why I don't wrong people. That's why I have not just waited until somebody got their knee put on their knee put on their neck and chest and George Floyd and died. I don't wait until something like that happens to voice that I think there needs to be police reform so that not so that they're not more effective or less effective at stopping a criminal, like outlawing chokeholds, but because of the rift between law enforcement and the inner city and this illusion that they go around shooting black men all the time. I've been talking about this forever, as far back as 2015 on television, talking about how these reforms needed to occur in the culture, in the inner city, and in law enforcement's ability to look at somebody and not make the situation worse and treat people like they're human beings and like they're a part of the community, because they are. And I've been saying that forever. Cops will give me blowback and say, listen, we get treated like animals and all day, all night, and we are the way we are because we can't let our guard down. I totally disagree with that. I think that I can shoot a criminal just as fast with a smile on my face as I can with a aggressive look. It's all in the tactics, and it's all in your ability to monitor this situation. And looking tough and being angry really does nothing to help you tactically. It doesn't. But Wendy's CEO to come out and say this makes it sound as though he believes that Rashard Brooks was tragically killed by cops. It's just not going to, in 3 days, nobody's going to care what the CEO of Wendy's had to say. So why come out and say it? Wendy's had no part in this. An incident happened in Wendy's parking lot and some thugs burnt Wendy's down. Had nothing to do with the fact that this guy got shot. They just want to, they're trying to cause mass chaos in the country, and they burnt Wendy's down. Stop coming out and apologizing when you have nothing to do with it. Wendy's has nothing to do with it. It could have happened 5 feet away in the street, and they still would have burnt Wendy's down. And then he goes on to say that Wendy's is also making funds available for We Care. I don't even know what that is. And then he goes on to say Wendy's is committed to doing our part to make real change by supporting our employees and the black community through social justice, youth, and education efforts. Okay, again, all these people have waited until George Floyd was killed. Where were they the week before, the month before, the year before? It's not like and listen, I worked in the inner city as an FBI agent for years. I never saw any Wendy's youth groups meeting or the building where, after school functions sponsored by Wendy's with a big thing up on the outside with free hamburgers for kids who don't get school lunch because they're too poor. Never saw Wendy's doing anything like that. Stop with these apology tours. It's just stupid. It's ridiculous, and it's divisive, because it's basically what it's doing is it is dividing the country and making people believe that the issue is right now. The issue is now. George Floyd got killed, then the world is going to burn down if we don't reform things now, because it's like Vietnam all over again, where they're just going through and just killing everybody in a village. That is not happening, folks. That is absolutely not occurring. The majority of people who get shot by law enforcement throughout the year are engaged in a felony, and they pose an imminent threat of loss of life or serious bodily injury to the community at large. And police will end up using lethal force to eliminate that threat so that you're safe, your community's safe, and their partners and themselves are safe. What you see happening right now has nothing to do with George Floyd's death or how many people get shot by law enforcement every year. This is the Democrat Party. These are leftists, communists, socialists, all the same, taking full advantage of this situation so that they can divide America even further to bring us down. And it's time for it to stop. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out.